So an exit can sometimes feel like death, like it's coming to an end, right? Business owner's mindset is towards growth, right? Life is towards growth, right? We want to do more, be more. We want to grow and evolve and develop. And our businesses are typically a reflection of that. One advisor calls this transaction process a no mulligan process, right? Like, throw me another ball that's a mulligan. I'm going to pretend it didn't happen. When you go to sell your business, there's a lot of no mulligan activity in there. That's what makes it different than growing a business. That's not in the nature of who we are as humans.
John Leonetti is the founder and the CEO of International Exit Planning Association and the author of the definitive guide, Exiting Your Business, Protecting Your Wealth. With over 30 years in the trenches, John has personally led transactions creating 400 to 500 million in liquidity and has consulted on more than 2 billion in private wealth. If you want to know how the top 1% of business owners actually get paid, John is the man with the blueprint. John, welcome to the show. What did I miss? I know that I read your bio, by the way, and it would have taken me probably another 40 minutes just to get through all of your accolades and the things that you've done. So what did I miss so that people know who we're speaking to today?
Oh, thanks, Jason. It's great to be here. The only thing I would say is, the passion that comes through in you and your program is in my DNA as well, to help these business owners. I've been engaged hundreds of times to do exit plans. A portion of those owners sought to monetize their wealth, and that's where the liquidity figures come from. I also set out through the IEPA, the International Exit Planning Association, to train other advisors. So we trained a few thousand of those to go do exit planning from the concepts that were in the book that I wrote. And then our Beacon Hill Equity Group business, that is our consultancy and M&A sell-side transaction and exit planning business. So I was very, very fortunate and blessed to be able to both advise business owners and, in fact, during the recession in 2008, to build this training company that goes out there and shares this information with other advisors that empowers them to go out and help their business owners. So the work's had a ripple effect there. And we like to think we're moving the needle, but it's a tough boulder to roll up that hill. There's a lot of work to be done.
There is a lot of work to be done, and it's an education. What I'm finding, you tell me if you think the same thing, but I'm finding that owners of businesses, they get to a place where they're really good at whatever business it is that they're doing, roofing, HVAC, whatever that particular skill set is, and they, in the past, have thought, well, I'm going to go ahead and sell my business. I'm going to go ahead and sell my own business. I'm going to start, looking for a broker and those kinds of things. There's been, and again, probably for you the same way, most of our clients are people that have gone through a bad attempt at an exit, which is extremely painful. But are you finding that business owners are becoming more selective on who they're looking for in the marketplace and doing more due diligence?
Yeah. So I think that let's talk about the marketplace first, right? And then we'll talk about the owners. It might help to do it in reverse order.
Okay.
The marketplace of investors, buyers, acquirers, partners has evolved tremendously in the last 10 or 15 years. And if we talk in terms of market segments, we can start to talk about businesses that have 5 million in revenue and down, or 5 million revenue and up, and corresponding profit levels, right? So each different segment of the marketplace that a business owner sits in has different types of buyers or investors. So, for example, that practitioner that you talked about, plumber, carpenter, HVAC, whether they're in the trades or whether they're running a small service business or manufacturing, if they have a small business, it could be a Main Street business brokerage type of business where an individual will buy it. If they have a bigger business, a private equity group or an investment group or another strategic buyer might come in and buy it. So yes, now the business owners themselves, yes, there's a more discerning marketplace because there are more options than there were 10 or 15 years ago. And the reason I started with the market, Jason, I come back to the owner, is because the major trend is the baby boomers who are coming into retirement, right?
Mm-hmm.
Defined as those born between 1946 and 1964. They're aging now and they're starting to feel tired. Today, I'm down at West Palm Beach, surrounded by a lot of boomers and a lot of retirees. And it's a great place to be when you've put in your time and you want to monetize that wealth. So that trend of aging boomers has been building up for last decade or so. But it turns out, Jason, to your point, these boomers are holding on quite a bit. They're not letting go. And in fact, many of them still enjoy parts of what they're doing, but not all of what they're doing, which is helpful because the market is accommodating different types of exits today than the market had been in the past. So we find that there's a level of discernment, there's a level of choice that's available today. And part of what we're doing here, I think, is trying to educate those business owners on what those options are and how they can go about, as your show suggests, build that company towards an exit.
Love that. Love that. Well, you and I were speaking before the show, and what I want you to speak on this. Give me, because the most lessons that I've learned, and the most lessons I know that business owners that have gone through this painful process have learned, they've learned from making mistakes. And so this show, to your point, is to educate, to let people know, what is your mindset that needs to shift? What are the strategies that you can employ so that you don't have to go through the pain that myself and John have gone through in our life trying to get deals across the table. So tell me a little bit about a war story that went bad, and let's pick through the lessons in that.
There's a lot there. It's a good point, Jason, right? So there's a lot of scars on both of our backs that we took on behalf of our clients, the business owners, in that path to get a deal done. And as you say, right, the thing that creates value in a small business is the owners made all these mistakes and the market recognizes that. They made the mistake with the hire. They made the mistake with the product. They made a lot of mistakes that cost a lot of money that the average buyer investor doesn't want to go through. So there is value from those mistakes. But one thing about that is one advisor calls this transaction process a no mulligan process, right? Like in golf, you can, you crank one out of bounds. Yeah. You just grab another one, throw me another ball. That's a mulligan. I'm going to pretend it didn't happen. When you go to sell your business, there's a lot of no mulligan activity in there. And that's what makes it different than growing a business. Exiting a business is very, very different. And those mistakes can become very expensive. Yeah. And these are things that business owners worry about that we can talk about that lead to horror stories where the competition finds out you're selling, your employees find out you're selling, and you don't want to tell them yet, and bad things start to happen in the business. And this is why this education you're doing is so awesome. In terms of horror stories, yeah, they're terrible. A business owner's mindset is towards growth, right? Life is towards growth, right? We want to do more, be more. We want to grow and evolve and develop. And our businesses are typically a reflection of that. So an exit can sometimes feel like death, like it's coming to an end, right? And that's not in the nature of who we are as humans. So it cuts against the grain of a lot of how we go about building businesses. And then that intersects with the emotional part of detaching from a business that you felt. And yeah, a lot of train wrecks happen there. They just come off the rails because what happens is the buyer comes in with a very different perspective than the seller. And if they don't get on the same page pretty quickly, there's a feeling, whether it is in valuation or whether it is in deal terms, there's a feeling that one side's trying to take advantage of the other. And in fact, sometimes that is happening, right? We can't be naive about that. And, in terms of war stories, I would say this, almost every successful sale transaction that we've been a part of We've gone through the trenches with the owner. We've gone through the mud. We've taken our hits. We fought back. We walked away from the table. We came back to the table. There really isn't a deal where we joke about as a unicorn where it just the buyer shows up and they put a valuation and you go to the closing and everything works out. They're all a different version of that. And it ranges from either the seller having remorse to the buyer trying to make changes that we feel are not fair. So we have to make a decision. Do we walk away? Do we hang in there? Do we work something out? Every one of them has a different uh, tone to it. And when we were talking before, I said we've had transactions that have gone for 4 months and we've had transactions that have gone for 39 months, right? Because a lot of it comes down to how much preparation there is, how oriented the owner's mindset is towards exit, and how prepared the company is as well. So as we like to say, a lot of them like snowflakes. They really are unique and different, each one of them. And what I would say is this, and it was the major theme of the book that I wrote, is the more an owner prepares, which is what we're doing here. It's a small part of what an owner needs to do. Then the less surprised they can be, the more they can begin to understand the buyer's perspective, the more they can understand their valuation, the more time they have to remove themselves from the business to make for a better exit. So there was a lot in there, Jason, but
No, I love it.
this, yeah,
I don't normally let guests go, but it's
yeah,
every word that you said was valuable,
yeah,
and it's funny, they have that old saying that Jesus didn't preach in his own hometown, right? So I'm happy that you're just repeating the stuff that we talk about
yeah,
consistently, because here's what I find: we kind of have this saying that we can't really help a business owner until they realize this one concept: everybody exits.
yeah,
That's like the base place where you go, oh, everybody, none of us are getting out of this thing alive. And so somebody else is either going to own our business or it's going to shut down. Right. In the
right,
case of, involuntary exits, people die, people getting, they get into health issues, they get into partner squabbles, they go through divorces, they just get plain worn out. And so talk a little bit about the idea for a lot of our business owners now. They're thinking about exit, which is a great thing because I've hammered home everybody exits. And so let people know a couple of things that they should be thinking about and 2 or 3 areas in their business that they should be focusing on right now as they start to prepare for exit.
yeah, perfect. Just taking a note here. So first things first, you're right on point. I believe an owner listening to this interview has to ask himself a fundamental question, which is until the mortality issue is resolved, which I am not aware anybody has an answer for that. Everybody will exit, right? Therefore, the fundamental question the owner needs to ask, independent of their wealth, their status, their business, is do they want the business that they've created, that they are most likely shepherding through the day, the week, the month, the quarter, the year, to survive beyond them?
Mm,
Because it won't happen organically.
right.
The owner has to set an intention for that to happen. And that becomes a very important concept. And sometimes I just simply relate it to children. I have 4 children. Our job as a parent is to raise a child so they become independent and they can go live on their own and be productive and happy. And the business can be looked at a similar way, but owners have a harder time letting go.
Mm,
And if they truly want the business to survive beyond their stewardship, beyond them founding it, right, to go on to the next generation of ownership, then commonly the business owner needs to shift their mindset away from looking at the business as a job that they really enjoy towards looking at it as an investment that they have a substantial amount of their wealth and time invested into that can be monetized. Two to three things that the average business owner can do. It depends on the size of the company, but number one, make the business less dependent upon you.
Mm,
Easy to say, hard to do,
yeah.
because the more dependent the company is on the owner, the more the owner has a job that someone else has to do. So the type of buyer they're looking for is someone that's looking to buy a job.
Right.
If they can make the business less dependent by building out that leadership team, building out the systems, building out the processes that operate independent of that owner, it starts to look less like a job, more like an investment. And guess what, Jason? That owner gets more freedom.
Yep.
They get more enjoyment typically when they do that. And they get what we refer to more as transferable value, value that somebody else will pay because it's not as dependent on the owner. That's number one, make the business less dependent on themselves. Number two, have good financials. Recognize that your buyer is most likely going to a bank, no different than when we all pretty much purchase real estate at some point in our life, and we go to the bank and the bank gives us a mortgage plus our equity. Most buyers of businesses are going to some form of bank or
Mhm.
financing or equity or mezzanine or debt, or it comes in all shapes and sizes in the lower mid market. So they have to present the numbers to the capital providers to help acquire the business. So when an owner has poorly kept books, or it's hard to interpret the numbers, then that's a challenge. And it only gets more challenging from there when you start to get into cash versus accrual based accounting. And then you get all the way into working capital, things you and I have been in the trenches over. But you
Mhm.
start with good financials, and good financials that can support a valuation and an acquisition. And the third thing I would say is related to owner dependence is leadership team. Empower your people, help set them up so that they can take on more responsibility in the business. I think whenever somebody buys a business that is beyond the owner, that lower mid market, maybe more than $5 million, as a typical benchmark, there's at least a few key people in there. That buyers, as we say, they're buying the jockey as much as they're buying the horse, right?
Mhm.
The horse is a company, the jockeys are the people riding it.
Yep.
That's a duo. So I'd say those are the three things that come to mind. For smaller businesses, make it less dependent, make sure the numbers are good, talk to the leadership team about what you're trying to accomplish. And those leaders might be buyers themselves, they could be family members. And then you get into your option analysis. So those are a couple of things, Jason.
I love that. Straight to the point. I agree with everything that you just said. You said, and on the kid thing, um, at least thank God so far, there's been the one no mulligans rule hasn't applied in my life. So, but I love that no mulligans. That is, it's so crucial as I think through, because I had this whole other question, but you spurred something, which is these business owners when they go through this process, and we call it a horizon. It's like, okay, when you do sell this business, right, what are you going to engage in? Because
Yep.
nobody wants to retire. You and I know those. You and I aren't going to retire. We talked about that first time we talked, right?
Right.
There's no way I'm going to retire, because the statistics tell us 18 months afterwards we die. Why?
Yeah.
Because of a lack of relevance, because of a lack of enjoyment, because of a lack of engagement with the rest of the world. And so, what do you do with your business owners that you work with that helps them attach? Because I know that this is a big piece, because so many of the deals that get done, $5 trillion in the United States last year, 2.5 trillion of it fell apart post close. After all the
Mm-hmm.
documents are signed, after some of the money transferred, they fall apart. And
Yeah.
in large part, I see a lot of these owners, they it's like a self sabotage thing. So,
Yeah.
how do you coach? How do you teach your clients on how to get beyond that?
Yeah. Great question. It's a massive part of what's going on. The market you and I serve, just to be clear, is that founder, that business owner, typically started this business in their garage or their basement and grew it from there. So there's a lot of attachment, there's a lot of pride, there's a lot of their identity tied to the business. Sometimes their name is on the door of the business.
Mm.
It's in their community. They're hiring their neighbors. They're known as a successful business owner. So when you strip that away, there's a loss of identity, there's a loss of purpose, there's a loss of that thing we talked about in life. The human experience is growth, right? Now you're in a void because you're not doing the thing that you learned how to do. There's something else too. Business owner is running at a very high speed, right? Like a race car. And, it's easy to say, okay, you're just going to retire and just relax. It's not that easy in practice. The owners are, if you want to get down to a real base level, chemically, the brain has those dopamine hits when you succeed, when you have those challenges. You're up for that task. Why do people climb mountains, right? Because they want that challenge. That's a lot of our entrepreneurs. So here's a problem. And I heard this said many years ago, and it's stuck with me. Aside from smoking cigarettes, which has statistically been proven to be bad from you, bad for you, so people will stop smoking because it's bad, even though they enjoy it. Aside from something like that, people typically don't stop doing things that they enjoy doing.
Right.
So a business owner, right? So a
Mhm.
business owner enjoys running their business. Who's to say that person should exit? Well, there's the mortality thing. So we have to balance this, right? Nobody's saying an owner should exit if that's not what they want to do. But if they want the business to go on beyond themselves and they want that wealth protected for their family, they should think about the things that we're talking about here, right? Now, in terms of what to do next, psychologically, it's a lot easier to go towards something than away from something. So, base level, if the owner has something that they could go towards, that they're excited about, that they could define a new reality that has that satisfies that urge that the business satisfied, that's sometimes the best scenario. For example, just when we spoke last week, I was in Southern Florida with an owner whose company we sold 3 years ago. The buyer didn't need him and he didn't want to work with the buyer. So he made a clean break. What's he doing now? In addition to enjoying the time that he never had before, he's doing commercial real estate projects. He's building storage facilities. He's doing things that are he's naturally inclined to doing that was what he was doing running a business, but in a very different form. He's looking at his capital base, his liquidity. It was a substantial liquidity event, and he's managing that through the real estate holdings that he has that are current. And he's evaluating opportunities for wealth creation in a different way that presents challenges that go beyond simply sitting on the beach or playing golf, right? So, playing golf is a leisure activity. For most people, it's not intended to fill their entire day. So, you want to think about as a business owner what would keep you engaged and satisfied so that you don't fall into that void. And sometimes it's consulting, sometimes it's sitting on boards, sometimes it's volunteering. Oftentimes it's a combination of those things, right? I'll tell you a quick story. We had one business owner who we helped sell his company. The buyer told him he would stay, and then the buyer was really struggling with having the owner there for a variety of reasons. Asked him to go. It was very abrupt, and he was in this void. And he talks about it, about how he lost his sense of purpose. And you know where he found his sense of purpose, Jason? He has a dog that now serves as a comfort dog, and he goes into children's hospitals and he brings comfort to those children on a daily basis. These are terminally ill children. And he says, look, it's tough duty.
Mm.
But what I have replaced the purpose of running the business with and the way he would build people and develop them in business, he now goes into those very difficult environments and brings comfort to children. And that's his job. And he does it all on a volunteer basis. And he's very satisfied in life doing that because he knows that he's making a difference once again. Now, that's a pretty strong example. This was an extraordinary person who felt that passion, but that's just one example. Some business owners can just, pick up a smaller business or do something on the side or do some consulting. So, overall, if those owners can find something to go towards that they're looking forward to, and they're not just about the closing date and the wire transfer and the money, generally speaking, they'll have a much more satisfied post exit existence. That's independent of what the buyer wants them to do. Because one thing that is true for most of our transactions, the buyer is buying control. The owner doesn't have any control anymore. Right. So one way or another, the owner has to accept that and realize that they're at the mercy of their new buyer, even though there's a partnership. It doesn't always go great.
Yeah, they're buying control, and the seller is selling certainty. It's an interesting how you can, wire it all the way down to that. It's, and I think about your passion projects and the things that you care about. One of the things that was immediately apparent to me was the level, what we call the level of give a shit,
Yeah.
And that's the rare thing. People are like, Jason, you're interviewing people that do what you do. Yeah. Well, our goal is to save and to enhance small and mid-sized business owners' opportunities to create wealth so that they can go, some of that other side of it is they can go and run for office, because we need more people that have been business owners, I think, in our government. I think, we can look at where we are right now and see that. And then, the passion part, I say all the time, we do the undercover rescues of the children in sex trade and work in domestic violence and doing all of those things. That's really where I think, as a human being, and we're talking about, you and I deal with a 10% anomaly, I believe, in humanity called a business owner. Right. And in that space, there's so much opportunity for service. And that's really what we get addicted to, because to be a business owner is to be a servant. It's to be a servant to your employees. It's to be a servant to your vendors. It's to be a servant to, and we get used to that. So I love what you said. And that example in the hospital is very, very powerful, because he's serving humans that are vulnerable. And most business owners are very, very strong in spirit, in character, in wealth when we help get them across that finish line. So thanks for sharing that. Let me ask you this. Give me an example of like one of your favorite deals.
One of my favorite deals?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the one that I mentioned earlier that we did in 4 months, this was a husband and wife. In this case, they had bought the business. It was much, much smaller. And we were introduced to them. And what was happening here, Jason, was without betraying any confidence.
Sure.
The wife was a very good wife and business partner, the husband, but grandchildren had come along, and there was a real urge to move on from the business. The husband was bumping up against structural challenges with his experience level, with the growth of the business, while at the same time, the business had tremendous potential. They were working the United States market. There was a product, but they had global opportunities that would require more capital. Clearly, these were baby boomers, grandparents, new grandparents who had to make decisions about their capital in a much different way. The reason I like this story isn't just because we had a phenomenal result in terms of finding the right partner and getting the right valuation. But these clients had the forethought to spend a year planning the exit. And they were willing to pay us as their advisors and put in the time. And the time was significantly more valuable to them than the money, right? This is a company with plenty of EBITDA and cash flow. What they paid us was inconsequential. What was important was the time and what you said, the mindset. Yeah. And about 2/3 of the way through the year, the owner called me up and said, can I drive down and meet with you? It was a little over an hour ride. And I said, of course. I'm more than willing to come to you. We do most. He said, no, I'm going to come to you. And that meeting lasted about 4 hours. And it was a real soul searching discussion about a mistake that was made in the path towards further growth and whether he had truly reached his max in terms of what he could do with the business.
Mm.
And because we had spent so much time getting to know the business and we had prioritized the areas of growth, and we said, okay, if we do X, Y, and Z, but this owner had to talk through with me one on one where his limitations were. And at the end of that meeting, I said, so we're ready to sell. And he was very quiet and he was very thoughtful and he was looking down and then he looked up and said, yeah, that's where we're at. And he knew before he drove down, that's
Yeah.
where he was at. Right. So then, because we were so well prepared, we got the deal done. And because we exceeded the valuation mark by such a wide margin, because he was so well prepared and the timing was good, and we found that buyer that capitalized on the global opportunities, we sat for a steak dinner a few months afterwards. And he said, that house I was going to renovate up on the lake? I said, yeah, we talked quite a bit about it. He said, well, with the extra money you got for me, I knocked it down and we're building a whole new one. And I said, that's fantastic, right? So in the end, everybody got what they wanted, but what happened was we were able to experience outside of the pressures of a transaction that you're very familiar with.
Yes.
Before it started, this owner was able to cement in their mind it was time to go. And their readiness and that mindset shift had happened. And then it was no coincidence that was a very short process that we ran. The multiple was great. The buying environment was great. And we found the right partner, and everybody went on to grow a successful business from there. That's probably one of my favorite stories, just because, like you, what I hold near and dear are the transformational impact stories that we have on owners' lives. And I'll tell you this, Jason, sorry, I don't want to sound preachy, but there is no sympathy or empathy in the world or in the government or with the IRS or anyone else for successful business owners.
None.
Everybody looks at them and says, well, they're the 1%, they're wealthy, that means their life doesn't have any issues or problems. And as you and I know, and it's a big part of your show, it's the exact opposite. It's these strong individuals that take all the problems on their shoulders and carry it on a daily basis and say, I will fix this today. I will fix my customer's problem. I will fix my employee's problem. I will fix the system's problem. I will do that so that I make my contribution to the world. So every time we have an opportunity to have a transaction like that, and there's a great many of them, but that one jumps out because because it had all the key elements of planning and execution. That's what I think everybody listening to this program hopefully has an opportunity to experience. But it doesn't come, it doesn't come by itself, as you know.
No, it doesn't. It's funny. Great story, by the way. And it started out with this line. Tell me if you kind of recognize this, and can commiserate with me. Started out with for basically for privacy's sake, right? That's how the conversation started. We can't talk about our clients, right? We can't talk about them, and that's why part of this podcast was to talk about the scenarios, right? And to pull people like you that have the scars and are physically and have physically done this for decades in protection of that business owner's asset, and to have these conversations so that we can share some of the stories. I feel like we walk around with this incredible amount of knowledge, and so many other business owners could take advantage of that. I think, to your point, I say all the time that everybody in the world that's not a business owner has their hand in the pocket of a business owner. Correct. I say this all the time. Everything that we experience came from an entrepreneur. Everything, the lights, right. the houses we live in, the air conditioning, it's all because of entrepreneurs, merchants back in the day. And if we do damage to that group of people, if there is damage, if we allow damage to happen, people will not like what happens. You then are narrowed down into being able to having to choose between working for a big corporation or begging from a government. And so this conversation we're having, brother, is, to me, is tantamount to freedom, because without financial ability to be able to change our stars, we're just, indentured servants at best.
That's right. The reason that the United States of America is revered and the greatest experiment in the history of civilization, at least the ones we know about. So,
Yes.
you know, is for exactly that reason. Our founding fathers set forth an environment where capitalism and freedom to prosper and individualism became paramount. And what flowed from that, when you allowed people to go and take risk, was the betterment of society as a whole. Because if what people were creating didn't have value, people wouldn't pay for it in exchange. So everything that an entrepreneur creates, unless it's some scam or something, has value that people are willing to pay for. And that creation process rewards that entrepreneur. But what's really being rewarded is the risk that that entrepreneur takes to get that product or that service or that idea out into the market. And for everyone that succeeds, as you know, there's a graveyard of those that failed. And there are many, many entrepreneurs who did not have that success story, but they eventually oftentimes do. And failure is one of the great teachers of entrepreneurs. As we were talking about, there's so much more to be learned from failure than there is from success. So at its core, right, if you look at the fact that the Dow Jones Industrial Average crossed 50,000, right? Every one of those publicly traded companies started as a small business.
Yep. Every one of
It's
them.
just not possible for it to have happened any other way.
Yep.
So every one of those, but bringing back to the theme of what business owners should think about, they should know the reason that Bill Gates and and Steve Jobs, okay, and Jeff Bezos are famous, is because what they did with their businesses is so rare that it deserves fame. To
Mm.
take something from an initial concept and grow it to a publicly traded company and then grow it to a global business, the same person doing all those different tasks, that's extremely rare.
Yep.
There's a point in time in the growth trajectory of a business where the owner typically has to bring in partners or turn it over to other people to take it to the next level. That was a part of the story that I shared, that owner realizing, I'm not the person to take it to the next level. That's a hard thing to conceptualize when you've created so much value in enterprise and you are the ultimate decision maker. You're the king of your castle. So no one's going to tell you you have to do this.
Yep.
But if you care about the business going forward and you are willing to monetize what you've created so far, then someone else can take it to a higher level and it might go on to be a global business. And that is, I believe, the foundation, right? When people say, hey, United States is the greatest country in the world, it is mostly because of capitalism. It is mostly because anybody can come here and succeed if they willing to take the risk and put in the effort. And that's what you and I are doing. We're taking the people that made it, that smaller percentage of that total 10%, and we're saying, okay, when you're ready to start the process of getting off the merry-go-round and enjoying the fruits of your labor, hopefully, and protecting that wealth, then there's a lot you have to know, right? And
Yep.
that's you and I are passionate about that entrepreneur. We're passionate about helping them with this final stage.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. This has been such a valuable conversation. Let me, as we wrap up, let me ask you one question. What do you see for those business owners that are out there like, oh, well, now AI and I have to compete against that. And we have this whole new technology and, should I even think about selling, or should I just continue to run my bit? What do you see in the future, and what are your advice for businesses that are looking toward that future?
So it's a great question, Jason, and you mentioned AI specifically. We're doing a lot of thinking about this as it relates to small business, more so than I ever imagined we would be.
Mm.
And if you'll pardon, I'm sharing some very initial thoughts, but since you prompted me, if you'll pardon, and if the audience will pardon the analogy, I think AI is a lot like COVID,
Mm.
and not that it's deadly, not that it's harmful, but I think when COVID first broke, everybody thought it would last a short amount of time and certain people wouldn't be impacted.
Mm.
And what made COVID unique was there was no running from it. You had to isolate, but you knew it was ever present. It impacted every single person on this planet.
Mhm.
And I believe the more I'm learning about AI, the more I'm relating it to COVID, as it relates to business, not as it relates to every individual. I do not think, and our thinking's developing quickly. I do not think you can be in business today unless you're very, very specific and you're immune from technology. Pardon the pun, but I don't think you can be in business without understanding the implication of AI because your competitor is incorporating AI into their practice. And if you're not, you're falling behind. And that, I think, is some early thinking on it. It's a pretty dramatic statement, but I can't get through a day and lately an hour without some impact from AI being felt in our business or in our clients' business. And my best advice to business owners is don't ignore it. And if you're not going to embrace it, consider an exit because if your competitor gets it figured out ahead of you, it could be significant. I do think that there will be industries, and I mentioned the trades earlier, that will become more valuable and more profitable because those are more immune. AI, at least in the short term, is not going to come fix your heating, your plumbing, your broken faucet, right?
Yeah.
It's not going to construct your home for you, at least not yet. But robots are coming quickly. That's a whole other issue. So
That's a
I
whole
think,
other issue.
Jason, business owners have to take the threat of AI going into their competitors' business very seriously.
Hmm.
And it's going to have an impact on value. I was telling our team this. We had a services business. It was a research business we sold this time last year, and some questions were coming up about AI in the diligence process, and we were able to get that transaction closed, even though we didn't have great answers. This company had not really embraced it. That was only 12 months ago. I think that window is closed. I think you cannot have an I don't know answer around how AI is going to impact your business unless you're immune from it, for very much longer if it hasn't already passed that threshold. So, for business owners who are looking at their business, looking at AI, it's a lot to try to figure out. Try to find somebody that's passionate about AI and get them on your team
Yeah.
because it's hard to do everything you do and figure out AI. But it is a pervasive technology, and there's so many applications for it. I do believe one thing, and I'll close on this because it's also kind of dramatic. I do believe it's the first time in the history of commerce that you're going to have a force multiplier like AI where you can actually get more productivity out of an organization without the linear increase in human capital. And that is a dramatic statement as well, but I believe it's a true one. This technology is a game changer, and it's going to impact the vast majority of businesses. So, yeah, for owners thinking about exit where AI is in your business, take a class or go to an industry session on it. Or, if you don't want to participate, think about a partnership with somebody that's in it or a sale because I think it's powerful stuff. I don't know if you have the same view, but since you mentioned AI, but generally speaking, our baby boomers are already heading that direction anyway, thinking about exit.
Yeah. I agree with you on the assessment where we're headed. We're in perfect lockstep on that.
Yeah.
People that are putting it in place and learning it, it really does. It's interesting to me to follow along and see that, AI runs on a set of SOPs, right? The
Yep.
thing that underlies a foundationally strong business is repetitive processes that create a predictable outcome. And
Right.
AI is no different. It is no
Yep.
different. And so now it comes down to the power of your ability to ask questions and the right questions and be able to direct AI to solve the problem, right? And I think that business owners are the best equipped because we've been asking ourselves these questions. We have to. You said it earlier in the podcast, right? We're constantly fixing problems, constantly, and then we learn, oh, I don't want to keep fixing that same problem, so let me put a process or a procedure in place
Correct.
so that I don't have to keep fixing it, right? And so I see it exactly the same way that you do. I think we're in for people that work hard and people that are real and people that are smart and people and businesses that are truly out to serve their client base. I think the next 2 to 4 or 5 years is going to be wildly opportunistic for them to make more money, to drive valuation, to do all of those things that no, but I don't think there's any other generation in history that I can think of that will see the increase in productivity and output that we're about to see in the next 3 to 5 years.
Couldn't agree more. There's more opportunity than there is threat for those willing to embrace it. The entrepreneur is that person that has the mindset of fixing things and understanding how it works. And once you get past generative AI, which is your basic, chat GPT, make me sound smarter with this, Word document,
Yeah.
and you get into agentic AI, what you're talking about is agents running processes and workflows no different than a human does, except it's automated.
Yep.
And now you have real power, and that's only the beginning. It goes on from there. But if you can get to that stage of understanding and see how it fits in your business, I agree with you, Jason. There is a new gold rush in the world of business, and it is artificial intelligence, and it is the implementation of AI into our businesses that provides that opportunity. And I think it's fascinating, and the risk takers are most likely going to be the winners, the same winners that have consistently met with guys like you and me
Yep.
over the decades to say, hey, this is what I built, and this is what I got. I think we're going to see a new wave of entrepreneurs coming forward who are saying, I saw AI early, I got involved, I cut expenses. And one thing to remember, Jason, and on a high note, if an average trading multiple for a lower mid-market business is 6 times, a 6 multiple of EBITDA or net income, right?
Mm-hmm.
If AI saves you in your business $100,000, your valuation just went up 600,000.
Yep.
If AI saves you 200,000, your valuation just went up 1.2 million. Business owners are intuitive people. They know what I'm saying. I just spelled it out because those cost savings and throughput that's available from higher productivity is going to drive the valuations of lower mid-market businesses in a way that makes it compelling to make that investment to get involved. And so I agree with you. Those are just basic examples, and they go way beyond that. But the cost savings element alone is compelling. So
Absolutely.
I'll leave it there. Yeah, it's a
I
big
love it.
conversation.
Well, I think you
Yeah,
and I could probably talk for hours, but
probably.
I think everybody can see why I wanted to have you on the show. We do similar and different things,
Yep.
but you're somebody that, when we talk about the people in this business, there's a large swath of them that paid $10,000, went to a course, and now all of a sudden they're an M&A expert, right? Talked about that a little bit. And those people
Yep.
are dangerous to the value of a business. they're dangerous to the family and the owner of that business, you got to do your due diligence. You got to do your due diligence. And I just am proud to say I'm in the same industry as you,
Likewise.
and for the outcomes that you produce, and who you show up as, and who you are for the business owner, who ultimately that's our customer. So
Yeah,
thank you.
likewise, Jason. No, thank you for the show and the work and the effort you're putting in. I'll just make one comment. Anytime you have a sale, like a real estate sale, and you get a percentage of that, you're going to have fees in the many hundreds of thousands, even the millions of dollars, with very, very low barriers to entry, right? Put aside the question of licensure. Anybody could be an investment banker. They could wake up tomorrow. Anytime you have that kind of income opportunity, it's going to attract somebody that wants to get there quickly and wants to take the shortcut.
Yep.
And for our business owners listening, yes, do the diligence. And if you're lucky, you'll find a Jason who really cares, because when the deal gets tough and when it gets complicated and when you have to have that conversation, should I do this or should I walk? You want to know that you have an advisor who, independent of their economic, outcome, is going to tell you, F it, we're walking. This is not for us. And then the business owner says, well, what are we going to do next? And say, we're going to figure it out. We are not taking this. We are not making this accommodation. This is unreasonable. And we're going to kill it right here. And until you get to that point, you can't really appreciate it. But what entrepreneurs can take from what you're saying, what I'm saying, is that the diligence isn't on what school they went to. The diligence isn't on how they did or what degrees they have or what designation. It is, what kind of warrior are they going to be in the trenches, when things are getting tough, and are they going to represent your interest or their interest at that time? Yeah. And because entrepreneurs are so instinctive, they can size up who they're talking to figure out if they've got that backbone. And you're one of those guys, Jason. I feel the same way. I was thrilled to be invited onto the show here, and I'm so glad that you're doing what you're doing, because this is so needed out there. With the warrior business owners that went out there and built these companies, they need help with that final step. And I just love what you're doing and the way you're doing it. So thank you.
Thank you, brother. Where can people find you?
That's a good question. Our Beacon Hill Equity Group is our consultancy and sell-side transaction advisory. It's a long email, but john@beaconhillequitygroup.com.
Okay. We'll make sure we put that up here on the when they do the editing and stuff too. So
yeah, I appreciate
that. Anything that you care about, anything that you're pushing right now, anything that we can help you, my audience can help you with. What are you working on?
No, just what you're doing here is awesome, right? Yeah. We're in a long-term battle here to try to rescue as much illiquidity as we can. The best thing an entrepreneur can do from this podcast is awaken to the idea that there's a lot you need to know to have a successful outcome, and seek those resources wherever you can, and find somebody you trust. Jason, you and I are only two people that are only going to handle, we're going to count them in the dozens, right? That we're going to do successfully. If we're lucky, we'll get to the hundreds.
Yep.
There's 500,000 lower mid-market businesses. There's 5.2 million that have less than 5 million in revenue. So there's only so much you and I can do. But what the entrepreneur listening to this can do is find the right person that can help them, and we can help them do that. If they're a smaller business, find a good broker. If they're a bigger business, find a good M&A advisor like yourself, and spend time getting to know them. Don't just go with your friend who referred you, that you play golf with, and run a process, interview a few of them, and make sure they're including education as part of their process, right? That's what I would say, Jason, is probably the most important.
Spot on.
Yeah.
Great piece of advice to take away. And I can't let you go without saying thank you to your team, who are
Yes.
excellent,
Likewise.
excellent human beings. I enjoyed getting to know them. They represent you extremely well, and
Thank you.
wanted to give them a shout out as well. But thanks for coming here today, John. I really appreciate it. Can't wait to. We'll probably bring you back because there's just too much, right? You and I could go for
That'll be
days and
awesome.
days on this.